Welcome to the 2009-2010 Sculpt Siouxland podcast walking tour from the Sioux City Journal. Listen as each artist discusses the new pieces. There are 20 this season, in addition to 7 permanent displays. The tour begins at 4th and Douglas Streets. Before each new sculpture, you'll hear its name and location. If you need more time or want to skip ahead, use the playback controls on your digital device. Let's begin. Hope, 4th and Douglas, middle of the block.
My first piece is called Hope, and I got inspired by a friend who had breast cancer, and she went through surgery. So the circular opening in the figure represents her loss, and it really made the person a stronger person. The sculpture is a symbol of strength and hope for everybody who goes through this pain. Well, I grew up around clay. My dad was an artist. He died, unfortunately. And I grew up with it, living in Belgium. So it's the most natural material for me. And I really love the material.
Paradox, 4th and Douglas, northeast corner.
Paradox grew out of a larger piece of 6 figures called Look, and You Will Find It. It was a very successful piece. It won the first award in sculpture at the State Fair in 2001 in Minnesota. And I had a lot of calls to buy that piece. But because it's 6 figures, it was quite expensive. And so I puzzled about how to produce something that had a similar message that would have been less expensive. And this 2-figure piece is what came out of that. Also, the whole idea of Look and of Paradox is about how important a person's attitude and outlook can be in the making of their day. And I think it's the dilemma that we're all faced with every day, is when we awaken in the morning, given the bad news or the troubles of the day, how do we approach that new day? And there's 2 ways to do it. One can be downtrodden, or one can be hopeful and looking up.
Puff of Smoke, 4th and Douglas, middle of the block.
Yes, it's made of aluminum with rubber rods and wood base. Maple, actually, base.
Okay. And
there are parts which are folded and are pierced through the middle with a drill. And then there are inserted loops of rubber that is 1/2 inch in diameter, and that is rounded into loops. The loops are inserted through a drilled hole at an angle each into the wood base. The wood base consists of several layers of laminate maple, which is primed and painted with just oil-based paint.
okay.
Which is sort of blue, dark blue. But 2 years ago I had a pacemaker put in, and that makes you think of how impermanent life is. And there is, I believe it originates in the Bible, but I couldn't quote it from where, but there is a saying, what is man? You are a puff of smoke, here today, gone tomorrow. Well, I think it applies to women as well, and I mean, men is, of course, all embraces here, but human beings are very fragile.
Cutting Copper Teeth, 4th and Pierce, northeast corner.
The Cutting Copper Teeth is actually a recycled title that I had in graduate school, where my daughter was born and she was teething at the time. And during that time, I really started to recycle a lot of different objects, as well as material that I've used in my artwork. And during that time, I was cutting a lot of copper, and my daughter was cutting teeth. You know, she was getting her teeth in, and so she was up at all hours of the night, you know, crying and whatever. So the whole cutting copper teeth is a play on that. I was up making art while she's crying, and then I'd hold her for a little bit. And so, yeah, that's it's kind of a recycled tile.
Horse, 4th and Pierce, southeast corner.
Quite a long time, several months, because I had to sculpt it in clay first, and it's kind of difficult because I had to build the armature first to support it, because the upper weight of the body is so much heavier than the legs. The legs are fairly thin. I wanted it to look. I wanted to look really graceful. And that was the main thing. I wanted to not do something that was stiff, but really do like life motion and this, you know, the movement of the horse, which is beautiful. I've done some abstract work, but most of the things lately that I've done are naturalistic. I do a lot of things with laser cut steel and aluminum, but I had never done a horse before in bronze, in clay, so I just wanted to see if I could do it.
Baying at the Moon, 4th and Pierce, middle of the block.
I had a client who wanted me to sculpt his recently deceased dog. So I did a pretty realistic sculpture of his dog. Well, it turned out he wanted an abstract piece. So after several iterations of taking away detail, I actually took away too much detail and ended up putting the ear, the paw, and the tail back on to reach this point of the creation. Well, one of the fun things about the abstraction that occurred is, instead of it being, and I'm not going to tell you what kind of a dog it originally was, it does look like many different breeds of dogs, potentially. And as I was working on it, people who came to visit my studio went, oh, that's a lot like my dog. So the beauty of the piece is it can represent many different dogs.
Guardedly Optimistic, 4th and Nebraska, southwest corner.
It's a grouping of 3 guys. I did a series of pieces with these particular types of figures. I used to call them the Stanleys. And this grouping is just 2 guys and then a guy behind, and they're clearly waiting for something. I like to think of them as waiting for an opportunity. One of the things about the Stanleys I've always felt is these are human beings that just want to do things right, but they're not quite sure what right is, and so they're a little bit paralyzed, so they can't quite decide what to do, so they just stand there hoping that they're looking okay. And the Guardedly Optimistic, I like to think that there's hope in the piece because they're hopeful, but there's clearly also the fear of making a mistake.
Fountain of Life, 4th and Nebraska, southeast corner.
Fountain of Life is a life-size sculpture of Christ's hands, and the nail holes show basically, and from those nail holes, water flows when the fountain is actually hooked up. It won't be running on the walk, but it is a working fountain, and the basin is about a 150-year-old Turkish basin that I found, and included that in the sculpture, and the robes are kind of in an old classical Renaissance style. The majority of my work has been commissioned by churches and has been biblical themed. I'm also working in some historical and military pieces now too. And if I had my way, I'd do nothing but the biblical and historical pieces. It's just, they've got the most meat to them. Well, I hope that the suggestion of the hands in the basin helps people to see that there is water flowing. Your mind generally fills that in, but the whole attitude is the the healing and the cleansing and the purification of the crucifixion, but without the very dramatic and obvious scene of an actual, passion scene.
The Mad Musician, 4th and Nebraska, northeast corner.
This one is actually a little different. It has some found objects in it. The other one is mainly the majority of the piece was sheet metal and sheet copper. This one actually has some phonograph object. It has a lock on it. It has wheels from like a chair. What else does it have on it? It also has these sheets that are advertisement signs that are basically numbers, and then a rod through the center of it that's been that is basically the body of the sculpture. Well, with my work recycling, like all of the objects within that sculpture used to be part of a different sculpture, an indoor installation, and so all of those objects basically came together to create this figure form that it is right now. So yeah, pulling and recycling those found objects to create something entirely new. Like all of the material on there has been manipulated somewhat by me, either striping or riveting the numbers together, or even spray painting and painting some of the rod or the wheels.
The Mad Musician, 4th and Nebraska, northeast corner.
This one is actually a little different. It has some found objects in it. The other one is mainly the majority of the piece was sheet metal and sheet copper. This one actually has some phonograph object. It has a lock on it. It has wheels from like a chair. What else does it have on it? It also has these sheets that are advertisement signs that are basically numbers, and then a rod through the center of it that's been that is basically the body of the sculpture. Well, with my work recycling, like all of the objects within that sculpture used to be part of a different sculpture, an indoor installation, and so all of those objects basically came together to create this figure form that it is right now. So yeah, pulling and recycling those found objects to create something entirely new. Like all of the material on there has been manipulated somewhat by me, either striping or riveting the numbers together, or even spray painting and painting some of the rod or the wheels.
River Spirits, 4th and Jackson, southwest corner.
It's made of 1/4-inch plate steel. It's about 8.5 feet high. It features kind of water shapes with 3 figures representing spirits in it. It's an homage to all cities where they were settled by a river and they maybe had barge traffic, or the river was essential to their commerce, and that allowed the cities to develop arts and culture. I saw some students that were working on cutouts, colored paper cutouts, kind of like the later work of Henri Matisse, and I thought, well, it's kind of like drawing with the scissors, and I thought, well, I could make a 3-dimensional piece rather than a 2-dimensional piece, so it kind of evolved into that. All the pieces were cut out by hand with a plasma cutter, and then I painted them with auto body paint for permanence.
Woman, 4th and Jackson, southeast corner.
My second piece is just called Woman, and it's just a woman feeling good about the things she did, about herself, her own life, her body. So it's like an inner peace, the symbol of inner peace.
is that kind of what you would like people to feel when they do see that?
Yeah. Just feel happy about the things you have, be grateful, and enjoy life. Well, in this world that is pretty materialistic, I think people just need to be happy with the things they have, with themselves, with what they have done, instead of purchasing and always wanting more. Just be happy with the things you have. Well, the pieces are made of clay, and they went through two firings, and they have a high metallic glaze. They have almost the look of metal.
Impressions on the Horizon, Lunar Poetry, 4th and Jackson, Northwest Corner.
Yeah, it's the first in a series called Impressions on the Horizon. This particular one is Lunar Poetry. It's two relief pictures, three-dimensional pictures that are painted. One side is the full moon at midnight, like on a summer day in the Black Hills. And the other side is like mid-afternoon on a fall day where the crescent moon is just rising in the sky. I call it impressions because it's almost like an impressionistic painting, although it's not quite as fast as an impressionistic painting because it's sculpture, so I spent some time on it. But it's meant to convey the memory left in your brain from seeing something beautiful, and you see, and you attribute that visual memory also with a feeling, and that's what I'm trying to convey, the feeling of what that was like.
Payday, 4th and Jones, Northwest Corner.
I was at a laser cutter having some pieces cut, steel pieces, and I happened to be outside and looked into their dumpster, and it was a dumpster where they recycled steel. In other words, this was waste material from projects, material that had been left over, and I found a series of about a dozen discs of half-inch thick steel. They were about 12 inches in diameter, and each disc had four rectangular shapes cut out of the center of it. And I thought that these represented a potential material for building a piece of sculpture out of, and so they actually gave me those pieces. They sat in my garage for a couple of years, and every once in a while I would pull one or two out and hold them up and move them around, twist them around, and try and get an idea of what I might be able to make out of them. Last year in the spring, I took a welding class and learned how to weld with a MIG welder, and you learned how to cut with an oxyacetylene cutting torch. And so I took 3 or 4 of those discs and cut them in either 2 pieces or 3 pieces, and then took 3 or 4 solid pieces that I hadn't cut up, and I composed these and welded them together into this very exuberant shape. And in the end, what happened was that I started noticing the voids in the plates, and they had a very strong meaning to me. And in the end, I called it Payday. And Payday is a monument to those times in our life when we have high expectations, and we plan around those expectations and get all excited about it, only to find in the end that the way it turns out isn't anywhere the way we thought it was and what we had planned around.
Walleye's World, 4th and Jones, Southwest Corner.
Well, I thought it would be kind of neat with the river in this area, and there's a lot of people that love to walleye fish, and I enjoy the outdoors and fishing myself. So anyway, I was inspired by the river down here to bring that piece. Yes, it's a solid piece of mild steel or carbon steel, and it started out about a 3.5-inch thick piece of steel, and then I carved it out like you would a piece of wood in a way, but just using grinders and the oxyacetylene torch, and shaped it into a walleye. And as time goes on, it'll just get darker and in its color. And then for the eyes, I welded stainless steel eyes in it, so they'll stay a little bit brighter. The grass is out of stainless steel, so that'll always stay shiny. That's 1/4-inch thick stainless steel, about 6.5-inch long blades, and I bent them to simulate the flowing of the grasses in the river as the current's going downstream.
Hunter's Dream, 4th and Jones, middle of the block.
Well, my media is totally 1/4-inch steel rod.
Okay.
Simply have to cut it, bend it, shape it, and weld it in place. The welding is really just nothing more than a hot glue gun. It's getting the thing cut and shaped and put it in the right perspective so it looks good when you're done.
Sure. And
I've always enjoyed hunting and fishing. We used to spend a lot of time on the Missouri River. We moved up here about 30 years ago.
Okay.
Well, I just try to make it as realistic as I can, and of course, something like that, you want to make it spectacular, so you try to give it a big, phenomenal set of antlers. On the fighting bull, I tried to make it look very masculine and muscular, and I did that. I did a good job on the bull. I did a much better job on the bull than I did the deer, because as you do a second or third or fourth piece, of course, you should be improving, and so far I am.
Goddess of the Grapes, 4th and Virginia, northwest corner.
Goddess of the Grapes was born out of a need for a piece for a new winery that is opening up about 5 miles from where I live. It's a really unique opportunity. And I created the Goddess of the Grapes to protect Minnesota grapes from the Minnesota weather. It's hard to grow grapes in Minnesota. The winter can kill them. So we have Minnesota propagated grapes that the University of Minnesota developed, and the Goddess of the Grapes will be their protector. She will be at the winery when it opens. I believe that'll be sometime this fall. And I have seen her image on the preliminary label for the new wine, so she's going to be on the back side of the label.
Thank you for touring Sculpt Siouxland with this walking tour produced by the Sioux City Journal. For more local interactive features, visit SiouxCityJournal.com.